In this lesson, we're going to learn how to combine state from a secondary stream when you need it for a request or similar. This is actually a pretty straightforward technique that you may already know, but this scenario is so common that I want to cover it just in case I can save you some time and struggle. It's quite common when building applications with RxJS to utilize a behavior subject to share common state, playing the role of an observable store for your application. For instance, in this example, I have a behavior subject which contains test data state for the quiz being displayed on the right. Now, with this setup, you'll inevitably run into a situation where you need to grab data from your primary store within another stream. For example, here I have an answer chain stream that is emitting on the click event of these radio buttons. I then need to make a request in order to save the answer, which I'm just simulating with this save answer function, which returns the answer value on a delay. So anytime I change my selection, we can see the answer logged to the console. But just saving the answer text isn't good enough. We also need the test ID in order to tie the saved answer back to the appropriate user. Now, we know this test ID exists in our observable store, but how do we get access to it in order to add it to our save request? The first approach I often see developers take after spinning their wheels a bit is just accessing it off the value property of the behavior subject. So, since the current value of a behavior subject can be accessed synchronously, the urge may be just to add a test ID property to the save object, and then do store.value.testID. And this does actually work. If we save and click on an answer, we can see that the test ID is now included. But this feels kind of dirty, right? Nowhere else in RxJS will we access state from a stream in this manner. This also would only work with behavior subjects because it has this value property you can access synchronously. If you're using any other subject or basic observable, you would be out of luck. So how do we refactor this in a way that is more consistent with RxJS norms and best practice? Well, it's actually quite simple. Anytime you need to access state from a secondary stream, you can use the with_latest_from operator. Let's see how this works. So before our concat_map operator, we can add with_latest_from. With_latest_from accepts a secondary stream to subscribe to. Then on each emitted value from the primary stream, it will emit that value plus the last emitted value from the secondary stream as an array. So in this case, our secondary stream that we need data from is our store. Concat_map will now receive the answer event as well as the current store state from the behavior subject. Let's then use parameter destructuring to go ahead and assign these values from the array emitted by with_latest_from. So the first item in the array will be the event, and the second item the state from our observable store. And since we actually only need the test ID property from our store in this stream, we could destructure this further to just grab the test ID property off our state object. But instead of this, I think it's actually more clear if we just make our stream pass to with_latest_from only emit the test ID. To do this, let's just call pipe on our store observable, and we'll use the pluck operator to grab the test ID property from our store state. We can then remove this extra object wrapper as our secondary stream is now just emitting the test ID. All that's left to do is to update our save answer function. So we'll go ahead and pass this function the test ID, and let's scroll back up, and we'll have the save answer function now accept the test ID. Now, instead of pulling the ID from the behavior subject using the value property, we'll simply use the test ID value we receive. At this point, we can save, and when we click on an answer, we can see everything is working as expected. Now, there is one big gotcha when using with_latest_from that I wanted to cover before we end this lesson. In the current example, we will always have the last value from our answer stream and store emitted on each click event because our store is a behavior subject. But you could run into some frustration using any other subject or observable if you don't understand how with_latest_from works. When you subscribe to an observable that uses with_latest_from, at that point it will subscribe to the stream you provide internally to collect the last emitted value. Because we are using a behavior subject, our store will immediately emit its current value, so by the time a click event occurs, we're guaranteed to have both the value from our store and the current event. However, with_latest_from will not emit any values if the stream you provide has not emitted at least one item, which can cause some subtle errors and is a pretty big gotcha in my opinion. To see what I mean, let's swap out our behavior subject with a regular subject. And since normal subjects don't accept the seed value, we'll call next on our subject emitting this same state. So let's go ahead and cut and paste this state object down. Remember, unlike behavior subjects, late subscribers to normal subjects only receive emitted values after their subscription begins. So by the time with_latest_from subscribes to our subject, it will have already emitted this state value. Because of this, when we save, we can now click on our radio buttons as much as we want, but because our store stream has not emitted any values since we subscribed here, no values will ever be emitted by with_latest_from until another value is emitted by the subject. This can cause headaches if you are not aware of this behavior, and is something you should keep in the back of your mind when using combination operators. To recap, an extremely common scenario in RxJS is the need to access state from a secondary stream, like an observable store, within another observable. To accomplish this, you can use the with_latest_from operator, which accepts an observable, emitting the value from the primary stream, as well as the last emitted value of the stream you provide as an array. Be careful though, if the observable you provide to with_latest_from has not emitted any value since subscription, any emitted value from the primary stream will simply be ignored.